Picture this. It's a rainy Tuesday. There's a mom sitting on her couch, stressed, overwhelmed, wondering how the heck she's going to get through the next 24 hours. She's watching her 3 kids under the age of 4 happily playing, completely oblivious to the pain that she is feeling. Her feelings of failure and self-doubt, questioning her self-worth, her shame, wondering why she had left her 6-figure salary in order to start her own business. That mom was me 10 years ago. I had just launched a training company, a company that increased client revenues and profits for women from around the world. I helped them implement systems so that they could reclaim their time, shift to growth, and start to scale quickly, all while freaking out about how I was going to pay for groceries and put gas in my car so I could drive to a talk I was giving the next day. How did I get into this position? It was remarkably easy. I launched my business with passion, purpose, and my personal credit card. I knew this business was my calling. I knew there was a need for it. I knew that I was the person to be running it. I knew that I had the skills, the chop, and the unwavering stubbornness that I was going to make this a successful company. You see, I knew I was a good investment, but nobody else did. After 3 banks turned me down for a loan or line of credit, I got out my credit card and I simply got to work. But 18% interest adds up very quickly. So there I was, playing with my kids, reeking of shame. And I did what every woman that I know would do. I figured it out. My eyes roamed the room and it landed on a paper cutting machine that I had bought so that I could become a scrapbooking queen. I had saved for years for this machine. I walked over, my finger came across the top of it, removing about an inch of dust. And I looked at it, realizing that I had only used it one time. But that's when the light bulb went off. I cleaned it off, I took pictures, I posted it on Craigslist, and within 3 hours, there was an amazing young man standing at my door, handing me $125, thrilled that he was going to win the Brother of the Year award because his sister had been wanting this machine for years, and he got to give it to her for her birthday. I took that money, I put it in my pocket, I went and bought groceries, I put gas in my car, and I crushed the keynote the next day. At the time, it really felt desperate. But in hindsight, in retrospect, I was just beginning to be an entrepreneur. I approached this with resourcefulness, creativity, and determination to make my business succeed. A lot of people might hear that story and think, wow, Shelaugh, you're a little bit of a hot mess. And I don't doubt them. But you know, I just saw in that moment a really good investment. Now, my story is not all that different from other entrepreneurs. Women, high-performing women, are leaving their corporate salary jobs for entrepreneurship in droves, to the tune of a 40% increase in women-owned businesses over the last 10 years. They, like me, were looking for flexibility and financial freedom so that we could spend time doing things that we wanted, as well as contributing to our families financially. And in the process, we contribute well over $2 trillion into our global economy. We're everywhere. We might be sitting beside you. We might be behind you. It's possible we're your sister or your aunt, your neighbor. Maybe we're your friend. And yet, despite being everywhere, we remain invisible, particularly when it comes to access to business capital. Why is that? Well, we've got to be looking at the types of businesses that women tend to build. Let's put them into 3 distinct categories. We've got those women that are selling things on the side, a side hustle. They're wanting to make a little bit of extra money so that they can either make ends meet or be able to go and buy something frilly or do something fun with it. There's another group of women over on this side that are looking to work with investors and strategic partners so that they can grow quickly and scale fast. They are building the next Google and Amazon. But then there's this massive microcosm sitting in between the two. These businesses are big enough that they're self-sustaining. We're able to pay ourselves a decent salary. We're able to contribute to our families financially. And we're in the process of impacting the world at the same time. But yet the companies aren't quite big enough to get the attention of loan officers or underwriters, and they're definitely not big enough to be having outside investors or equity partners. So where we're falling short, I guess, is the size and scalability of our business. However, when I went back to the banks 8 years later, and I handed over 8 years of profit, I showed them a multi-six-figure company that was thriving. I handed them papers that showed the 30% growth that happened year over year. But even then, my business still did not meet the traditional financial institution lending models. How could it be? Well, it's because I hadn't built up my business credit. When I asked the nice guy that was sitting behind the desk, I said, well, what do I have to do to build my business credit? I've just been running a business for 8 years. And he said, well, you need to have a business loan, or a business line of credit, or a business credit card. And I said, oh, you mean everything that I haven't been able to get over the last 8 years? And he sort of looked at me and was like, I know, it's a little silly, isn't it? He said, tell you what, I can't give you a business loan, but I sure can give you a personal loan. But you're gonna have to put a personal guarantee behind it. Please. It's 2022. Well, then it was 2019. He said, the other way that I can get you a loan is if your husband, now hang on a second, I love my husband. He's incredibly supportive. He's a great guy, but he appears nowhere in my business, nowhere on my financials. But I could have a loan if I had his signature. I felt like I'd done a time warp back to 1954. How can this be? How can it be that still, after 8 years of running a highly successful company, I was still deemed an unworthy credit risk? Folks, it's not just me. This is not just my story. According to First Women's Bank, despite women-owned businesses growing twice as fast as the national average, women earn 4.4% of lending capital. 100%? 4.4% to 50% of our population. This is unacceptable. If you want to dive deeper into the numbers, when you look at the number of business loans that are credited to women, it's 16%. Yet women are making up more than 50% of the entrepreneurial group that is growing. How can this be? Well, we've got to take a look at our biases. Oh, Shelaugh, there's no such thing as a bias. Please. Someone recently said to me, knowing full well what it is that I do, she said, women entrepreneurs are a group of whining and complaining women that are selling cakes from their kitchen. That is the social bias that is out there about the women-owned companies. In a recent radio ad that was aired a year ago, from one of our national banks here in Canada, a woman entrepreneur had finally received a loan for her bakery. And her response in the ad was, oh goody, now I can finally organize my sprinkles in rainbow order. My friends, we are not selling cakes from our kitchen. We are not organizing our sprinkles in rainbow order. We are running strong and profitable businesses that are impacting both the economy and society. How do I know this? Because I work with these women. I think about Laura, whose company supports nonprofits to get more grants so that they can do more of the work that they do and help more people that they serve. She does this while being the main financial breadwinner in her family. Or I think about Andrea, who has built her law practice up from nothing. She helps entrepreneurs protect their assets and has just recently bought her first commercial property so that she can create generational wealth for her family. Or I think about Natalie, who is saving our planet through her eco-friendly and sustainable lunch bags and totes, all while quietly infusing millions into our national economy. There is nothing about these businesses that are cute. There's nothing about them that are unicorns and rainbows. They are sustainable, they are profitable, they are strong, and they are overlooked for access to capital. When our system is not set up to build and support this building block of our economy, women are forced to use whatever tools that they have at hand. And inevitably, the one constant that women are able to reach to is their personal credit. That's where I found the $10,000 that I needed to launch the first iteration of my company. I needed a website, I needed a logo, some copy, and a little bit of coaching so that I could get my programs and pricing just right and get them out in the market. And as you know, when I went to the bank, it said no. I went to my savings account, it said no. I went to the checking account, it definitely said no. And so I went to the only place that I knew I could get money, and it was my personal credit card. Now, you can call it irresponsible. That's fine. You can also call it short-sighted. I was not raised in a family that lives off credit cards. But you know, I simply called it a way to fund the launch of my business. But the tricky thing about credit cards is they need payments. So even though my business in that first year was making enough to cover the astronomical childcare costs that I had to have the privilege of working, and I was able to pay some of my financial obligations, I didn't have enough revenue to be able to cover the costs of the credit card so that I could bring the balance down to a manageable amount. And that literally is how the money snowballed into me sitting on the couch trying to figure out how to make enough money so that I could work. It's not unusual for the credit score of a woman entrepreneur or any entrepreneur to be lower than average. When you're bootstrapping the growth of your company, you are negotiating and deciding every single penny that comes in the door and deciding where it's going to be. And oftentimes, the best place for that dollar is to be reinvested back in the company, sometimes at the expense of personal financial obligations. But the reality is our businesses still are being seen as less than. And oh boy, we have fought too hard to be less than. So what can we do? If we want to find a different answer, we have to ask a different question. So let's stop asking why women are not being invested in as a viable business tool. And let's start asking the question of how can we better invest in women entrepreneurs? Well, I truly believe that success leaves clues. Why don't we take a page from the micro-lending programs that have been running in developing countries over the last couple decades? Women are empowered through a loan to make very strategic investments. $50 to be able to buy supplies so that they can sell their jewelry or their products at the local markets. $250 so they can access some rental space for their shop. They're able to turn these investments and generate returns which pull them and their families out of poverty. They are then able to reinvest these funds, build up their credit scores, and have the ability to reinvest in themselves and those around them. So let's ask ourselves, why can't that happen here? So I know that $50 is not going to go that far when it comes to building your business. It will most likely get you at least 4 lines of written copy on your website. It might even get you coffee during the week's launch of your new company. But you know, $5,000 would get you a new website and could be the difference between you taking the ideation of your company into making it a real thing that could be earning money. Or $10,000 could go into the marketing campaign that you're going to use in order to get more visibility and start reaching more people so that you can be increasing your sales. And $50,000 might be the loan that you need in order to make a strategic hire of a key player in your company so that you can start growing and scaling. It's all relative. Now, the other thing, and the other interesting piece about the micro-lending programs is the way that women deal with money. When they are seen, and they are understood, and they are empowered, they work twice as hard to repay the loans. They diligently repay without missing a cent, and they have a way lower default rate than some of their male counterparts. So let's take a moment again and ask, why can't that work here? Especially when you consider that microloans to women yield more than just financial benefits. We talked about the types of businesses that women build. They tend to be social enterprises with a focus on a social, cultural, community, or environmental outcomes. Women are playing at the intersection of profit, purpose, and philanthropy. we are literally making the world a better place and making money in the process. The other interesting side effect of how women do work is the ecosystem that they build. Women tend to hire other women. Let's take my company as an example. I have a woman who does my bookkeeping. My podcast is produced by a woman team. Same goes for my marketing agency, customer support, graphic designers. I have female coaches, and my lawyer is a woman. And at the height of the pandemic, despite falling through the cracks of every single government financial assistance program out there, I had to hire more women, more contractors, so that I could keep my business going and keep my lights on. I had all of the stresses that we all faced with the lockdowns and homeschooling, and with those 3 kids that we heard about at the beginning. It was a little bit much to try and keep the business running at the same time, but I did. I kept my lights on by keeping other women's lights on, other women who incidentally also fell through the cracks of every single financial assistance made available by the government. The other interesting thing about women is what they do with their profits. We're putting food on tables, we're covering childcare costs, we are contributing to our family's finances, and all while building a life that's worth living. Women remain the highest donors, the highest percent of donors to charities. The more women make, the more profits they have. The more profits they have, the more they can donate. It's a beautiful equation. Many are reinvesting the profits from their company into educating their children or people from their family so that they can create a better future for the next generation. Others are beginning to start investing in other women-owned companies. You can see how this ecosystem fuels each other, and it just keeps growing and getting stronger and getting stronger. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could open up that ecosystem and bring other people into it so that we could really make some magic? So what now? How can we make this work? There are absolutely discussions that have to be had with financial institutions so that we can address the systemic, unconscious bias that is in the loan application and approval process. We absolutely need to be talking to government about more micro-lending programs that actually are accessible by women entrepreneurs. They're not just news headlines, they actually are on the ground and running. But what about you and I? What can we do? Our job today is to shift perspectives. And when we shift perspectives, it all starts with an awareness. And awareness comes from being curious. So what if you got curious about the women companies that are around you? What if you started asking questions and learning more about them? What if you opened your networks and made introductions for these women to people who they may otherwise not have access to? We definitely need to shine the light on more stories and journeys of a diverse group of women and the impact that they're having on society. This will allow more people to see what's going on and have women entrepreneurship become more mainstream. And if you have the means, consider offering a small loan. It might be the difference between helping a woman get off of her couch and shift to profit. I know she's worth it, and so do you.